Welcome to the third 9 weeks retake test review. So we've just taken the third 9 weeks test. We had a lot of good grades. There were a lot of 100s. A lot of students did very well. We also had students on the other end of the spectrum, and today's quick screencast review, quick as I can make it, is a way of covering that material again because we hope to improve upon our original score. This is a picture of Yosemite National Park in California. Yosemite was sort of found and entered into in 1851 after California had become a state. And so, beautiful place. There's some very interesting history around it. We won't go there, but again, it's Apple's operating system, but it's also part of history we're talking about right now. Take a quick look over here on Edmodo. You'll see that your test is posted, and here's a quick peek inside the test. Again, it's a retake, and you're going to have 120 minutes to take it once you begin. But let's begin by looking at the third 9 weeks test review and some of the things that we need to cover. First off, there's a couple things in this Microsoft Sway presentation that I have not built out much. There's not a lot of pictures with it. So a couple of these are the Steamboat, the Cotton Gin, the Free Enterprise System, Gadsden Purchase, and the Age of Jackson. And I think those can be explained very quickly. So again, be ready for about 5 of those very quick. First thing, we'll go to the map. Let's hit escape, and let's back out, and let's go to Google Earth real quick. Number 1, America as a nation of farmers moved their products down the Mississippi River, and this was largely a one-way experience. As farmers in Missouri and Illinois and Iowa sent goods down the river, and it exited New Orleans out into the Gulf and then traveled around the East Coast to the cities of the East. Steamboats meant that you could now travel upriver as well, and that was a huge thing. The first ones were quite dangerous. They would often explode on you, but the steamboat was a huge invention in that it made upriver travel possible. Remember again, the Louisiana Purchase will be all about New Orleans and us as a nation of farmers trying to get around the tax that the French were putting on our goods. So just keep in mind the steamboat fits with that very nicely. Also important is the cotton gin, which causes cotton to explode across the American South. It makes cotton production much more valuable, and as a result causes slavery to increase greatly. Free enterprise we've talked about quite a bit. It is capitalism, but capitalism now has a bad connotation. So we have gotten away from capitalism, at least Star has, and so you'll hear capitalism everywhere else, but when it comes to Star, it's free enterprise. The Gadsden Purchase also comes later. What you'll see is after the Mexican-American War, and we get the lands of the Mexican Cession, the Gadsden Purchase is this small area of land down here. They're trying to build a railroad across the American South, and so they want to avoid all the mountains of the West, and in purchasing this land you get a relatively flat area. Tucson, Arizona right here is part of that land purchase. And so again, it's all about building a railroad through flat land instead of mountains. And now let's go back to the Microsoft Sway. So again, what we'll see here is we'll just simply begin and we'll start knocking these out. First thing here is Washington's view on foreign policy. Washington in his farewell address talks about how America needs to avoid entangling alliances. In other words, you get too close to England or France, you're going to get pulled into a war. And that war will only hurt the United States. Washington also talks here about political parties and talks about how he's frustrated and has his dislike of political parties. Of course, Washington's dislike of political parties, in the grand scheme of things, really means nothing because we still have them today. Additionally, here's the Federal Judiciary Act. So the Constitution sets up the Supreme Court, but much of the federal system of courts isn't specified, isn't spelled out in the Constitution. Because of this, they have to create the Federal Judiciary Act, which spells it out, how we're going to structure the rest of the American court system. So the Federal Judiciary Act is in addition to the Constitution and helps spell those things out. Checks and balances we've talked about a lot. Obviously, you're looking at a picture of a triangle between the three branches of government, each branch having the ability to check each other's power. It ensures that no one branch is allowed to concentrate all the power because concentrated power corrupts. So checks and balances is one of our principles of the Constitution. The XYZ affair. We know that the French Revolution kicks off, and it's a major problem for the first four American presidents. By the time of the second presidency of John Adams, Adams sends diplomats to France, and they request to meet with the French, and three Frenchmen say, "We will not meet with you unless you pay us money." They demand a bribe. It angers John Adams, not that that's very difficult to do. John Adams basically tells the country to prepare for war. It's a big step back in our relationship with France at the time. Our third president is going to be Jefferson. And again, remember, Jefferson's view of the Constitution is he doesn't know if he can buy land. And if his view, this strict constructionist view, he doesn't know he can do it, well, then he doesn't think he can. But when he goes to try to purchase New Orleans down here, what occurs is the French say, "Hey, we will sell all of this to you. We need money. We're fighting all of Europe on our own." Napoleon just says, "We'll sell all of it to you." And Jefferson, it's too good a deal to pass up. So it doubles the size of the United States. Jefferson worries whether it's unconstitutional or not, but at the end of the day, it's just too good to pass up, so he does it. Lewis and Clark are then sent out. We don't know what we've bought. We don't know what's out there. We think we might find woolly mammoths. We're hoping we can find a river that goes straight to the Pacific Ocean. Of course, we never find mammoths. We never find that river. It's a painful journey, but Lewis and Clark both survive this thing, and they come back and they emerge with maps, and they help us to navigate future westward expansion. Later on, fourth President Madison, you have the War of 1812. And the big takeaway from the War of 1812 as it relates to the test is in what is sometimes called the Second American Revolution, America is no longer able to obtain goods from England because it's at war with England. As a result, America must industrialize and produce its own goods. And at the end, war is not really a victory for us, it's more of a tie, but America feels like it wins the War of 1812. It emerges feeling confident and good about itself. And this will bring us to the fifth president. And this is James Monroe, and that's who you're looking at here. James Monroe presides over an era that we call the era of good feelings. And again, students ask me why it's called that. Simple answer is because it felt good. And the reason that it felt good was because we had just beaten England again in our minds. And America, actually at this point, is going to have only one political party. So all the ugliness of typical American politics just isn't there. The economy's going well, we feel like we've won a war, and there's only one party, so we're not at each other's throats. Following Monroe, later on, we're going to get Andrew Jackson, who of course got his fame in the War of 1812. Jackson, this is a cartoon of him trying to cut the head off the bank, and Jackson feels like the bank is a direct threat to him and the common people of the United States. So Jackson feels it favors the rich, and he kills the bank. Killing the bank was really stupid, along with some of the other things Jackson would do. Killing the bank results in a huge national recession. Good job, Andrew. Additionally, during this time, you have another dark spot on Andrew Jackson's legacy. And that's that during this time, America is in the process of moving Native Americans off their lands. The Seminole are getting moved in Florida. The Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Creek, they're all trying to get moved to a place called the Indian Territory. It's the land that we don't want. It's far out to the west. And especially with the Cherokee, when they find gold on their lands, well, at that point, they've just got to go. So again, these Native Americans they're not assimilating, they're not becoming Christians, they're not becoming farmers like Jefferson wants them to become. So we've just got to push them west. And we put them on the land that we want least, which is, at that point, it's Oklahoma. So again, moving Native Americans to Oklahoma. And specifically, the Cherokee come up with a brilliant idea. Again, the Cherokee, this is the Native American tribe that basically intermarries with whites and blacks and every type of American more than any other tribe. And more Americans have Cherokee ancestry than any other Native American ancestry. And the Cherokee come up with this idea, let's take it to the Supreme Court. Because we realize when we try to fight this United States, it doesn't work well for Native Americans that do that. So let's take our fight to the court, and they win. The problem is Jackson's president, and Jackson will completely ignore the Supreme Court and move them anyway, resulting in the Trail of Tears, where 1/4 of the Cherokee on the trip will die on their way to Oklahoma. Again, a very dark spot in American history. The protective tariff, and you're looking at the scary old face of John C. Calhoun, a man who didn't age well. The protective tariff was something that benefited northern industry. It hurt southern agriculture. And so one of the things you'll keep hearing about all the way into the Civil War is one of the frustrations that both sides have is not simply with slavery, but it's also with the tariff. John C. Calhoun becomes the leader of Southern frustration and South Carolina's frustration. He calls it the Tariff of Abominations. And what that's going to set up is it's going to set up a showdown that we call the nullification crisis with South Carolina specifically. And South Carolina, under Calhoun, is going to threaten to secede and leave the country. Because South Carolina is saying we can nullify. In other words, we can cancel out or do away with any federal laws that we disagree with. And Jackson says that would create anarchy. It would be lawlessness in the country. Nothing would ever get enforced or done. And he threatens Calhoun in South Carolina. And South Carolina ultimately doesn't secede. But the result is, again, this is a prelude to what's going to happen 30 years later, where South Carolina does secede and becomes the first state to secede in the American Civil War. So the nullification crisis is about the tariff. It's about a concept of state rights where South Carolina and other states can simply nullify federal laws and ultimately talk about leaving. It's a preview of the war to come. Urbanization and industrialization is very simple. We're farmersonly.com, or pardon me, farmers only. We are farmers, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. And now we have the beginning of industry and factories. Those factories are built in the cities. And so the rise of factories begins to move people out of the city, off the farm to the city. And so it begins this process And it begins to shape the country that we have today, which is we have a nation of people who live in cities, no longer a nation of people who live on the farm. So it increases the size of cities and the number of people who lived within them. Manifest destiny. Again, this is one of the most loaded terms in American history. The very simple version that's taught at the elementary level is America was very confident about itself and felt like it could go from the East Coast to the West Coast. The more adult version that you get when you get to college is that basically God wanted us to have all this land, that we were a chosen people, we had a divine destiny to do this, and it's going to become a major component in America being very aggressive in its expansion. And sometimes the aggressiveness that you see is very morally debatable. The land, we deserve to have it, they don't. They being Mexico or the Native Americans or the Native Hawaiians, or you'll see as you study American history, this is a term that has a lot of negative connotations to it, and it can be taught different ways. So we're nearing the end here. The Compromise of 1820. Again, anytime you see compromise, you need to think Henry Clay, because in American history, he's just the guy who comes up with these. Basically, the Compromise of 1820 says everything beneath the Missouri Compromise line will be slave in the new territories. So it's saying outwards, this will all be slave, open to slavery. We'll make an exception, though, for Missouri. Missouri will be slave as well. But if we bring in Missouri, we also need to bring in a free state. And so they're also going to bring in Maine up here. And so the Missouri Compromise sets this pattern of bringing in a free state and a slave state. And that is maintaining the balance. The problem is that you're not always going to be able to find a free state at the same time you can find a slave state, or a slave state when you find a free state. It's just not going to work cleanly like that. So the Compromise of 1820 is destined ultimately long-term for failure. But for a while, it's a good compromise. It works. So finally, we're now reaching what we call the Mexican-American War. And as a result, in the 1840s, of the U.S. annexation of Texas, the U.S. inherits a border dispute. Texas has a border dispute with Mexico. Mexico claims all the way up to the Neches River that goes beneath San Antonio and Corpus Christi, while America claims all the way down to the Rio Grande River. And so what you'll see is that America positions itself aggressively to send its troops across the Neches over to the Rio Grande. And now that they're on the Rio Grande, they're in Mexican territory, in Mexican eyes. And so Mexican soldiers are there, and they shoot and fire at the Americans. And when some Americans are killed, President Polk wants this. It's the justification he needs to declare war, a war that he believes America can win. And when it wins, America will get land. And so what you see in the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 48 is that America will end up with the Mexican cession, getting 40% of Mexico. California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado. It will get all this land that was part of Mexico. Lincoln famously opposes the war. Henry David Thoreau goes to jail over it, refusing to pay taxes that year. It's a very interesting war in its effects. So that's the Mexican-American War. Now what comes out of it is the Compromise of 1850. As a result of getting California, people in 1848, California comes in. 1849, gold's discovered in California. Now people begin to flood. It takes 6 months to get across the country to California. Many people just simply leave by boat and go all the way down around South America and then land in San Francisco and come through there. So you have people going over the top, over the mountains, across the plains, 6 months. You have people going around South America. You have other people going to Panama and then sending their stuff across Panama and then getting in a boat and going from there. Either way, by 1850, there's enough people for statehood. But should it be a slave or a free state? And so the Compromise of 1850 says California will be free. But the southern states have to get something out of it too, and so they'll get the Fugitive Slave Act. Popular sovereignty, meanwhile, is going to pop up in other territories that are brought in as part of the Compromise and as part of the Mexican Cession. And that says that those states get to decide themselves. And once again, Compromise of 1850, just like the Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise, again, the guy at the center of it all is the great compromiser, as we've nicknamed him, Henry Clay. So again, thank you guys for listening. Once you're done here, just submit the remainder of the play posit with this. It'll be a nice, easy grade, hopefully, for you. And go and take the Edmodo test when it's convenient for you. It's the retake. And so I'll add the two grades together, divide by 2, and that will be your score. So if you have any questions, direct message me through Edmodo, or direct message me through Remind 101, or shoot me an email, gsmithy@ccisd.net. Thank you.